The morning Sarah Chun said goodbye to her daughter Emma would be the last normal morning Earth would ever know. She kissed the 8-year-old's forehead as the yellow school bus pulled up to their suburban home in Denver, Colorado. Emma's backpack bounced as she ran toward the bus, her dark hair catching the sunlight. "Love you, Mom," Emma called back, waving from the bus window. Sarah waved back, coffee mug in hand, watching until the bus disappeared around the corner. She had no idea that in 6 hours, every school bus on Earth would be empty, and every child between the ages of 5 and 12 would simply vanish. Captain Marcus Reaper Rodriguez was leading a training exercise with his Navy SEAL team in the mountains of Afghanistan when the emergency communication came through. The message was brief and impossible to believe. Global child disappearance event. All children ages 5 to 12 missing simultaneously. Return to base immediately. Marcus pulled off his helmet and stared at the device. His team gathered around him, their faces showing the same confusion he felt. Johnson, the youngest member of their unit, spoke first. "Sir, what does that mean? Global child disappearance." Marcus shook his head. "I don't know, but we're about to find out. Pack it up. We're heading home." The helicopter ride back to base was silent, except for the whirring of rotors. Each man was lost in his own thoughts, trying to process what they'd heard. Marcus kept thinking about his nephew Tommy, who had just turned 6 last month. His sister lived in San Diego with her family. Surely this couldn't mean what it sounded like. Back at base, the briefing room was chaos. Officers were shouting into phones, screens showed news feeds from around the world, and everyone looked like they'd seen a ghost. Admiral Peterson stood at the front of the room, his usually calm demeanor cracked. "Gentlemen," Admiral Peterson began, his voice hoarse. "At approximately 1,400 hours GMT, every child between the ages of 5 and 12 on planet Earth disappeared simultaneously. Not just missing, disappeared. Security cameras show them they're 1 second gone the next. No trace, no evidence, no explanation." The room erupted in questions and protests. Peterson raised his hand for silence. "That's not all. 30 minutes after the disappearances, we received this transmission." The screens around the room flickered and showed something that would haunt humanity forever. A being that looked somewhat like a tall, gray insect stood in what appeared to be a metal room. Its 4 arms moved as it spoke in perfect English, though its mouth didn't seem to match the words. "People of Earth," the alien said, "your children have been selected for integration into the Zephyrian Empire. They will be educated in our ways and serve as bridges between our species. This is an honor. Do not attempt to locate or recover them. Your planet will be evaluated for potential membership in our empire. Comply with our observers, and your transition will be peaceful." The transmission ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. Marcus felt something cold and dark settle in his chest. This wasn't just an attack on humanity. This was the theft of their future, their hope, their most precious treasures. Every parent on Earth was now living their worst nightmare. "Sir," Marcus said, standing up, "what are our orders?" Admiral Peterson looked at him with eyes that held barely controlled rage. "As of now, every military unit on Earth has one mission: get our children back, by any means necessary." Over the next 72 hours, humanity discovered they were not alone in the universe, and they were not the dominant species. The Zephyrian Empire controlled hundreds of star systems and had been expanding across the galaxy for thousands of years. They had a simple method. They would arrive at a planet, take the children to ensure compliance, evaluate the adult population, and either integrate the useful individuals into their empire or eliminate them. It was efficient. It was ruthless. And until they came to Earth, it had worked perfectly. Sarah Chun sat in her empty house, staring at Emma's toys scattered across the living room floor. She hadn't moved them since that first day. Couldn't move them. The local support group met at the community center every evening, but Sarah couldn't bear to listen to other parents crying. She needed to do something. The knock on her door came at sunset. When she opened it, she found a man in military uniform standing on her porch. He was tall, with Hispanic features and intense dark eyes that seemed to see everything. "Mrs. Chun? I'm Captain Rodriguez, Navy SEALs. I'd like to talk to you about your daughter." Sarah's heart jumped. "Did you find her? Did you find Emma?" "Not yet, ma'am, but we're going to. May I come in?" Marcus had spent the last week studying files on civilian specialists who might be useful in their mission. Sarah Chun was a computer systems engineer who had worked on satellite communication networks. More importantly, she was a mother whose child had been taken, which meant she had the motivation they needed. Mrs. Chun, Marcus said, sitting across from her in the living room. What I'm about to tell you is classified, but we're putting together a team to go after our children. We need people with your skills. Go after them? You mean into space? That's exactly what I mean. Sarah stared at him. The idea was impossible, wasn't it? Humans had barely made it to Mars. How could they possibly fight an interstellar empire? I know how it sounds, Marcus continued. But we've made contact with other species that the Zephyrians have conquered. Turns out, we're not the first planet they've done this to. The difference is, we're the first to fight back. Fight back? How? Marcus leaned forward. The same way humans have always won fights against superior enemies. We don't fight fair. We don't fight by their rules. We fight to win. 2 days later, Sarah found herself in an underground facility she hadn't known existed, surrounded by the most deadly and intelligent people she'd ever met. There were Navy SEALs, Marines, computer experts, engineers, scientists, and linguists. Everyone had the same hollow look in their eyes that she recognized from her own mirror. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a xenobiologist who had been rushed to analyze the Zephyrian technology, gave them their first briefing. She was a small woman with gray hair and steady hands, but her voice shook when she spoke about the aliens. The Zephyrians are what we might call bureaucratic conquerors, Dr. Harper explained. They've perfected a system of expansion that has worked for millennia. Take the children, evaluate the adults, integrate or eliminate. The key word here is system. They're not used to variables. What kind of variables? Asked Lieutenant Commander Torres, a submarine specialist. Resistance. Specifically, the kind of illogical, desperate, impossible resistance that humans are famous for. Marcus stood up. Doctor, what are we looking at in terms of their military capabilities? Overwhelming, Dr. Harper said simply. Their ships are powered by energy sources we can barely comprehend. Their weapons can destroy cities from orbit. Their defensive systems make our best efforts look like throwing rocks. The room fell silent until Sarah spoke up. But they took our children alive. Dr. Harper nodded. Exactly. They need the children unharmed for their integration process. That means they can't simply destroy Earth if we become a problem. They need to be more careful. How careful? Marcus asked. Careful enough that a small, well-planned operation might have a chance. A very small chance. Marcus looked around the room at the faces of desperate parents and professional warriors. Small chances are what we specialize in. The next weeks were a blur of training, planning, and preparation. Scientists worked around the clock to reverse engineer captured Zephyrian technology. Engineers designed weapons and tools that could function in space. The military units trained for combat in zero-gravity and alien environments. Sarah learned to handle weapons, to work in a spacesuit, and to operate systems that shouldn't have been possible to understand. But humans, she discovered, were remarkably good at figuring out how to break things, even alien things. The breakthrough came when Dr. Harper's team discovered something unexpected in the Zephyrian computer systems. The aliens were incredibly advanced, but their technology was based on completely different principles than human technology. More importantly, their security was designed to keep out other aliens, not humans. It's like they've been using the same lock for thousands of years, Dr. Harper explained to the assembled team. Every species they've encountered thinks in similar ways. But humans? We're chaotic. We're unpredictable. We approach problems from angles they never considered. Marcus smiled grimly. So we're going to teach them about human creativity. The plan was insane, which made it perfect. Instead of trying to match the Zephyrian ship for ship, they would infiltrate their command structure. Instead of fighting their entire empire, they would target their leadership. Instead of playing by the rules of galactic warfare, they would introduce them to human terrorism. The Zephyrians have 17 major command ships, Admiral Peterson explained during their final briefing. These ships control entire sectors of their empire. We're going to take them all at the same time. Sir, asked Commander Williams, a Marine explosives expert, how exactly are we getting to 17 different locations across the galaxy? Peterson smiled for the first time in weeks. We're not going to them. We're bringing them to us. The final piece of the plan was the most dangerous. They would broadcast a signal that would appear to be a surrender from Earth's government. The Zephyrians would send their command ships to Earth to begin the formal integration process. What they wouldn't know is that the signal contained a computer virus designed specifically to target their systems. Sarah had spent weeks working on a virus with a team of the world's best programmers. It was designed to activate simultaneously across their entire fleet, disabling their weapons and shields for exactly 17 minutes. 17 minutes for specially trained teams to board each command ship and take control. 17 minutes. Marcus said to his team as they prepared to board the captured Zephyrian transport ship they would use to reach the enemy fleet. That's how long we have to board their flagship, fight our way to the command center, and take control of the ship. What if it takes longer? Johnson asked. Marcus checked his weapon one final time. Then we die fighting, and hopefully we take enough of them with us that the other teams can finish the job. Sarah was part of the technical team that would take control of the ship's systems once the Marines cleared the way. She wore the same black tactical gear as the SEALs, but she felt like she was playing dress-up. These men were warriors. She was just a mother looking for her daughter. As their ship approached the massive Zephyrian command vessel, Sarah looked out the viewport at the alien fleet surrounding Earth. Hundreds of ships, each one capable of destroying entire cities. They looked like metallic insects, all sharp angles, and glowing energy conduits. 2 minutes to insertion, the pilot announced. Marcus gathered his team around him. Remember, we're not just fighting for our children. Every species that has ever had their kids stolen by these bastards is counting on us. Every parent who never got to say goodbye is looking to us for justice. Don't let them down. The transport ship shuddered as it made contact with the alien hull. Sarah's heart pounded as the cutting torches began burning through the enemy ship's armor. In a few seconds, they would either die or begin humanity's first interstellar war. The breach opened with a shower of sparks and alien atmosphere. Marcus was the first through, his weapon raised, his team behind him. Sarah followed with the technical team, stepping into an alien world that smelled of ozone and metal. The corridors of the Zephyrian ship were tall and narrow, designed for beings very different from humans. Emergency lights flashed red, and an alien alarm wailed through the ship. The virus had worked. They were in. Teams Alpha and Bravo clear the path to the command center. Marcus spoke into his comm unit. Charlie team, secure the reactor room. Sarah's group, find their main computer core. Sarah and her team of technicians moved through the alien corridors, following the schematics they'd memorized from capture technology. The ship was massive, more like a flying city than a spacecraft. They passed rooms full of strange equipment, chambers that might have been sleeping quarters, and what looked like laboratories. Then, Sarah saw something that made her heart stop. Through a transparent wall, she could see into a large chamber filled with small beds. Human children lay in those beds, connected to machines by thin wires. Her daughter Emma was there, asleep, but alive, her small face peaceful despite the alien technology surrounding her. Captain Rodriguez, Sarah whispered into her comm unit. I found them. I found our children. Marcus's voice crackled back. How many? Sarah looked through the chamber, counting frantically. Hundreds, maybe thousands. They're alive, but they're connected to some kind of machinery. Can you wake them up? Sarah studied the control panel outside the chamber. The writing was alien, but the virus had given them access to the ship's translation systems. I think so, but I don't know what disconnecting them might do. Dr. Harper, are you reading this? Marcus called to the scientist who was monitoring their mission from Earth. I'm here. Dr. Harper's voice came through the comm. Sarah, those machines are probably neural interfaces. The aliens use them to reprogram the children's minds, making them loyal to the Empire. Disconnecting them suddenly could be dangerous, but leaving them connected is worse. Sarah's hands shook as she approached the control panel. Everything they had planned, everything they had risked, came down to this moment. She thought about Emma's laugh, her smile, the way she had waved from the school bus that last morning. I'm bringing them home, Sarah whispered, and began working on the controls. The ship shuddered around them as Marcus and his teams fought their way through alien defenders toward the command center. 14 minutes left before the virus wore off, and the enemy weapons came back online. Sarah's fingers flew over the alien controls, guided by determination and the translation systems. The chamber doors opened with a soft hiss. Sarah ran to Emma's bed, tears streaming down her face as she gently disconnected the wires from her daughter's small head. Emma's eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened. Mommy, Emma whispered. Yes, baby. Mommy's here. We're going home. Around the chamber, other technicians were waking more children, helping them sit up, reassuring them that they were safe. But they weren't safe yet. They still had to take control of this ship and somehow win a war against an entire empire. Marcus's voice came through the comm unit, strained but triumphant. Command center secured. Sarah, how are those kids? Awake and scared but alive. What's our status? 12 other teams have reported successful boarding actions. We got 13 of their 17 command ships. That's enough. Sarah held Emma close as the ship's gravity shifted, and the lights changed from red emergency lighting to normal illumination. Through the viewport, she could see Earth, blue and beautiful and still free. This is just the beginning, Marcus said over the ship's communication system, his words broadcast to the entire Zephyrian fleet. You came for our children first. Now we're coming for your empire. The first battle was over. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger and more dangerous universe. But as Sarah looked into her daughter's eyes, she knew they would never stop fighting until every stolen child was home, and the galaxy knew that humans protected their own. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled for thousands of years. They had never encountered anything like humanity. They were about to learn why that had been a very good thing for them, and a very bad thing for everyone else. 3 months after the children came home, the real war began. Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of what had once been the Zephyrian Command ship Dominion Enforcer, now renamed the USS Retribution by its human crew. Through the massive viewport, she could see the alien shipyard where they were preparing for the next phase of their campaign against the Empire. The shipyard had belonged to the Kathrani, a species that had been conquered by the Zephyrians 200 years ago. When human forces had arrived and destroyed the Zephyrian garrison, the Kathrani had welcomed them as liberators. Now, beings who looked like tall, blue-skinned humanoids with 6 arms worked alongside human engineers, converting captured alien technology into weapons that could fight the Empire. Emma ran across the bridge, chasing one of the small maintenance robots that the Kathrani used to keep their technology functioning. She laughed as the robot beeped and spun in circles, trying to avoid her. Sarah smiled, but the happiness was mixed with worry. This was no place for children, but Earth was no longer safe either. The Zephyrian Empire would not forgive what humanity had done. Mom, look what Zix taught me, Emma called out, speaking to one of the Kathrani technicians in their clicking language. The alien responded with what Sarah had learned was laughter, a series of harmonious chimes. Marcus approached Sarah at the viewport. He still wore his tactical gear, but now it was modified with alien technology that made him look like something from a science fiction movie. She's adapting well, he said, watching Emma play. Too well, Sarah replied. She shouldn't have to adapt to this. No child should. Maybe not, Marcus said. But this is the universe we live in now. The question is what we do about it. Admiral Peterson's voice came over the ship's communication system. All department heads to the war room. Time to discuss our next move. The war room was a strange blend of human and alien technology. Holographic displays showed star maps with hundreds of worlds marked in different colors. Red for Zephyrian-controlled systems, blue for liberated worlds, and yellow for targets under consideration. The room was filled with humans and representatives from 6 different species that had joined what was now being called the Liberation Coalition. Admiral Peterson stood at the head of the table, looking older than his years, but determined. Status report. How many ships do we have operational? Commander Williams, who had become their expert on captured alien technology, consulted a holographic display. 47 ships of various classes, all retrofitted with human weapon systems. The Kathrani have completed modifications on another 12 vessels, and the Valdris have contributed their stealth technology to our scout ships. The Valdris were a species that looked like large, intelligent octopi. They had been among the first to join the coalition after humans had freed their homeworld. Their technology focused on camouflage and infiltration, skills that human special forces had quickly learned to appreciate. What about the Zephyrian response? Peterson asked. Dr. Harper, who had become their chief intelligence analyst, activated another display showing enemy fleet movements. They're mobilizing everything. According to our sources, the Zephyrian High Command considers humanity an extinction-level threat to their empire. They're pulling ships from across the galaxy to deal with us. Good, Marcus said grimly. Let them come. The more ships they send after us, the fewer they have protecting their other worlds. Sarah studied the star map. noting the patterns of Zephyrian control. The Empire was vast, but it was also spread thin. They ruled through fear and overwhelming force, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to be intimidated. There, she said, pointing to a cluster of systems near the galactic rim. The Nexus worlds. If we could take those systems, we'd cut off their supply lines to the outer territories. A new voice spoke from the corner of the room. It belonged to HFY, a former Zephyrian commander who had defected after witnessing what humans could do. The alien looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a snake, but had proven to be invaluable in understanding enemy tactics. The Nexus worlds are heavily defended, HFY said in its translated voice. The humans would face 3 full battle fleets. 3 fleets, Marcus repeated thoughtfully. How many ships total? Approximately 300 vessels of various classes. The room fell silent. The Liberation Coalition had fewer than 50 operational ships, and most of their crews were still learning how to use alien technology. A direct assault would be suicide. We don't fight them directly, Sarah said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. We've been thinking about this wrong. We're trying to fight like them, with big fleets and massive battles. But that's not how humans win wars. What do you mean? Admiral Peterson asked. Sarah moved to the star map, highlighting different systems. Look at their empire. It's built on a foundation of fear and compliance. Every species they've conquered believes that resistance is impossible because the Zephyrians have never been beaten. But we've already proven that wrong. Marcus began to smile as he understood her point. You want to start a revolution. Exactly. We don't need to conquer every world ourselves. We just need to prove to the conquered species that the Zephyrians can be beaten. Once that happens, the Empire will tear itself apart from within. HFY made a sound that the translator identified as skepticism. The conquered species fear the Zephyrians more than they hate them. You would need to demonstrate victory in a way that cannot be denied or suppressed. Then, we give them a demonstration they'll never forget, Marcus said. We take one of their core worlds. Not some frontier outpost, but a world at the heart of their empire. Dr. Harper pulled up another display. The Zephyrian homeworld is Zenthri Prime. It's in a system with 7 inhabited planets, all heavily defended. The system has never been successfully attacked in the history of the Empire. Never been attacked by humans, Sarah corrected. They don't know what we're capable of. Admiral Peterson studied the tactical data. Even if we could somehow reach Zenthri Prime, we don't have the firepower to take on their home fleet. We don't need firepower, Marcus said. We need Sarah's virus. Sarah looked at him in surprise. Captain, that virus was specifically designed for their command ships. It wouldn't work on an entire planetary defense network. Not the same virus, Marcus clarified, but the same principle. You show that their systems are vulnerable to human computer techniques. What if we could design something bigger? Something that could shut down not just ships, but entire planetary systems? Dr. Harper leaned forward. You're talking about a cyber weapon that could disable an entire star system's technology. The complexity would be enormous. Then, we better get started, Sarah said. Because if we're going to do this, we need to do it before they adapt their systems to counter our techniques. The next 6 weeks were a blur of preparation and planning. Sarah worked with teams of programmers and engineers from multiple species, each contributing their understanding of Zephyrian technology. The virus they created was unlike anything that had ever existed, a cascading system failure that would spread through connected networks like wildfire. Meanwhile, Marcus trained special forces teams from across the coalition in techniques for planetary assault. They couldn't match the Zephyrians in terms of raw firepower, but humans had thousands of years of experience in asymmetric warfare. Emma spent her days in the ship's education center, learning alongside children from half a dozen different species. Sarah watched her daughter playing with young Kathrani and Valdris, speaking in a mixture of languages that shouldn't have been possible to understand. The children adapted faster than the adults, finding common ground despite their biological differences. She's going to grow up in a very different universe than the one we knew, Marcus observed, watching Emma help a young Kathrani with a puzzle. Better or worse? Sarah asked. Different, Marcus said. The question is whether we can make it better. The assault on Zenthri Prime was planned for maximum psychological impact. Instead of attacking the homeworld directly, they would strike all 7 planets in the system simultaneously. The virus would disable the planetary defenses, allowing small teams to capture key installations and broadcast messages of liberation across the Empire. Remember, Admiral Peterson told the assembled strike teams, "Our goal isn't to conquer the Zephyrian homeworld. We can't hold it against their entire military. Our goal is to prove that it can be done and to rescue as many of the enslaved populations as possible." The Coalition fleet moved through hyperspace toward Zenthri Prime, their ships hidden by Valdra stealth technology and powered by Kathrani energy systems. It was the largest military operation in human history, and it was being conducted with technology that hadn't existed 6 months earlier. Sarah sat in the communications center of the Retribution, her fingers flying over controls that would deploy the virus into the Zephyrian network. Around her, technicians from multiple species worked to coordinate the attack. The countdown reached 0, and she initiated the upload. For 30 seconds, nothing seemed to happen. Then, across the star system, the lights went out. Planetary defense platforms powered down. Orbital weapons stopped tracking targets. Communication networks went silent. The virus spread through every connected system in the Zenthri system, turning the heart of the Empire dark. "All teams, this is Admiral Peterson," came the voice over the comm system. "The garden is dark. Time to plant some seeds." Marcus led the assault on Zenthri Prime itself, his team dropping from orbit in modified Zephyrian shuttles. The capital city was in chaos, with emergency power flickering on and off as their systems struggled to cope with the viral attack. The team's target was the Central Broadcasting Facility, a massive spire that transmitted propaganda and orders across the Empire. If they could capture it, they could send a message that would reach every conquered world. The building was defended by Zephyrian soldiers, but their weapons and armor were powered by the same systems that the virus had compromised. It was like fighting opponents who were half blind and half paralyzed. Marcus and his team fought their way through the building, moving from floor to floor toward the transmission center. Behind them, other teams were securing other objectives: power plants, government buildings, and military installations. "This is too easy," Johnson said as they climbed the stairs toward the broadcast center. "Where's their main military force?" "Probably trying to figure out why their ships won't start," Marcus replied. "We've got maybe an hour before they get backup systems online and start responding. Let's make it count." The broadcast center was a vast room filled with alien technology, most of it now dark and silent. Sarah's voice came through the comm system as she worked to bring the systems back online using their captured access codes. "Broadcasting systems are coming online," she reported. "You'll have full galactic transmission capability in 30 seconds. Marcus approached the main transmission array, thinking about what message would have the greatest impact. Around him, his team secured the room and prepared for the inevitable counterattack. "This is Captain Marcus Rodriguez of the Human Liberation Coalition," he said into the broadcasting system, his words being transmitted across the galaxy to billions of enslaved beings. "6 months ago, the Zephyrian Empire made a mistake. They took our children. Today, we're taking their homeworld." He paused, letting that message sink in on worlds where resistance had been thought impossible for centuries. "To every species suffering under Zephyrian rule, they are not invincible. They can be beaten. They can be driven from your worlds and your systems. The age of the Empire is ending, and the age of liberation has begun." The transmission continued for 17 minutes, with human forces across the system reporting their successes. They had captured military installations, freed prison camps full of slaves from dozens of different species, and demonstrated that the Zephyrian military could be defeated. When the backup systems finally came online and Zephyrian forces began their counterattack, the Coalition forces were already evacuating. They had never intended to hold the system permanently. The message was what mattered. As the Coalition fleet jumped back into hyperspace, Sarah watched the Zenthri system disappear from the viewports. They had accomplished something that the Zephyrian Empire had thought impossible. They had struck at the heart of the Empire and escaped to tell about it. Receiving transmissions from across the galaxy, Dr. Harper reported. "Uprising on Kelvani 7. Rebellion in the Theta Sector. The Morvani have declared independence and are requesting Coalition support." Marcus joined Sarah at the viewport, both of them exhausted but satisfied. "Think it worked?" "Look," Sarah said, pointing to the holographic display that showed real-time intelligence across the galaxy. Red systems were turning yellow and blue as rebellions erupted on world after world. "The Empire is cracking." Emma ran up to them, excited and proud. "Mom, did you see what we did? We beat the bad aliens." Sarah knelt down to hug her daughter. We helped a lot of people today, sweetheart. Are we going to help more people? Sarah looked at Marcus, then back at her daughter. Yes, Emma. We're going to help as many people as we can. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, but they had never faced an enemy that turned their greatest strength into a weakness. Their vast communications network, designed to control their empire, had become the tool of their liberation. Their reliance on technology had been exploited by a species that specialized in breaking things and fixing them in new ways. Most importantly, they had never faced an enemy that refused to accept that anything was impossible. Humans had looked at an interstellar empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds and asked a simple question: how do we break this? Now they were finding out, one liberated world at a time. The war was far from over. The Zephyrian military would adapt, their defenses would be strengthened, and they would marshal their vast resources for a counterattack. But the damage was done. Across the galaxy, enslaved species were remembering what freedom looked like, and they were willing to fight for it. The empire that had seemed eternal was beginning to crumble, and at the center of that collapse was a small blue planet whose inhabitants had committed the unforgivable crime of fighting back. 2 years after the fall of Zenthri Prime, the galaxy was at war with itself. Sarah Chun stood in the command center of New Geneva Station, humanity's first permanent installation outside the solar system. Through the massive transparent aluminum windows, she could see ships from dozens of different species docking and undocking, bringing supplies, refugees, and reports from the expanding rebellion against the Zephyrian Empire. The station had been built in the ruins of a Zephyrian stronghold that the Coalition had captured 6 months earlier. Now it served as the central hub for the Liberation Coalition, a growing alliance of free species that had one thing in common. They had all suffered under Zephyrian rule. Emma, now 10 years old and speaking 7 different languages fluently, ran through the command center chasing a small flying creature that belonged to the Silithai, a species of energy beings who had recently joined the Coalition. Sarah marveled at how quickly children adapted to impossibility. Mom, Ambassador Krextal wants to know if you can help with the translation matrix for the new Alliance members. Emma said, speaking the musical language of the insectoid Hivetar without thinking about it. Sarah nodded to the tall, mantis-like alien who served as one of their diplomatic coordinators. The Coalition now included 47 different species, each with their own languages, technologies, and ways of thinking. Keeping them all working together was like conducting an orchestra where half the musicians were playing instruments that didn't exist. Marcus approached her with a grim expression. He wore the uniform of a Coalition admiral now, his chest decorated with medals from a dozen different worlds. But Sarah could still see the Navy SEAL in his bearing, the man who had led the first desperate mission to save their children. "We've got a problem," Marcus said quietly. "Intelligence reports suggest the Zephyrians are planning something big. They've been pulling ships back from the frontier world for the past 3 months." Sarah studied the holographic display that showed the current state of the galactic war. The Empire controlled about 60% of their original territory, but that territory was now riddled with rebellion and resistance movements. However, their core worlds remained heavily defended and strongly loyal. "How big?" Sarah asked. "Big enough that even Vexhai is worried, and that alien doesn't scare easily." Vexhai, the former Zephyrian commander who had become one of their most valuable intelligence assets, appeared at Marcus's side as if summoned by his name. The alien serpentine form moved with fluid grace that still made some humans uncomfortable. "The Zephyrian High Command has authorized the use of their final option," Vexhai said, its translated voice carrying undertones of genuine fear. "Operation Cleansing Light." "What's Operation Cleansing Light?" Sarah asked, though she had a feeling she didn't want to know. "It is their ultimate contingency plan for dealing with species that cannot be controlled or integrated," Vexhai explained. "They sterilize entire star systems, eliminating any possibility of resistance. The technology exists. They have used it before, though not for many centuries." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "How many systems are we talking about?" "All of them," Vexhai said simply. "Every system where humans have established a presence. Every world that has joined the Coalition. They intend to eliminate the concept of resistance by removing all examples of successful rebellion." Sarah stared at the galactic map, imagining hundreds of worlds being reduced to dead rock. Billions of beings who had only just tasted freedom being wiped out to send a message to the rest of the galaxy. How long do we have? She asked. Intelligence suggests 6 months to prepare their fleet, another 2 months to position it for simultaneous strikes, Vexhai replied. 8 months before they begin the cleansing. Then, we have 8 months to end this war, Marcus said grimly. Admiral Peterson's voice came over the station's communication system. All senior staff to the main conference room. Emergency strategic session. The conference room was crowded with representatives from across the coalition. Humans sat next to Kathrani, Valdris, and dozens of other species that had never been in the same room before the war started. The diversity was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Admiral Peterson stood at the head of the table, his hair now completely gray but his eyes still sharp. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all classifications, we face a choice. Surrender and accept the destruction of everything we've built, or find a way to end this war in the next 8 months. Dr. Harper activated a holographic display showing the Zephyrian core systems. Our analysts have identified their weakness. The Zephyrian Empire is controlled by the Eternal Council, a group of 12 beings who have ruled for over 3,000 years. They make all strategic decisions from their fortress world of Omnicus Prime. Take out the leadership, Marcus said, understanding immediately. It's not that simple, Dr. Harper continued. Omnicus Prime is in a system with some of the heaviest defenses in the galaxy. It's also surrounded by a gravitational anomaly that makes hyperspace travel extremely difficult. There's only one stable route in or out of the system. Sarah studied the data. What if we didn't use the stable route? The gravitational stresses would tear apart any ship attempting to jump directly into the system, Dr. Harper explained. Any alien ship, Sarah corrected. But human ships don't follow the same engineering principles. We've been modifying them since day one. Vexhai made a sound that the translator identified as surprise. You cannot be considering a direct hyperspace jump into a gravitational anomaly. The mathematics alone would require computational power beyond anything available. Emma looked up from the small device she'd been playing with, a gift from the Sci-Fi that looked like crystallized lightning. What if you didn't try to calculate it? What if you just felt your way through? The room fell silent. A 10-year-old human child had just suggested something that violated every principle of space navigation that had been established over millennia. Feel your way through? Dr. Harper asked gently. Emma nodded seriously. Like when you're walking in the dark and you can't see where you're going, but you can feel the walls and know which way to turn. Zixtal taught me that the Sci-Fi navigate that way through energy currents. Zixtal, the Sci-Fi ambassador, rippled with colors that indicated agreement. When it spoke, its voice was like music made of light. The young human speaks truth. We do not calculate our path through energy storms. We sense the correct direction and flow with the currents. Marcus looked at Sarah. Is that even possible with our technology? I don't know, Sarah admitted. But Emma's right about one thing. Every time we've beaten the Zephyrians, it's been by doing something they thought was impossible. Admiral Peterson leaned forward. What would we need? Sarah began thinking out loud. A ship equipped with Sci-Fi energy sensors, Kathrani computational systems for real-time navigation adjustment, Valdris stealth technology to avoid detection, and a human crew crazy enough to try it. I volunteer, Marcus said immediately. So do I, Sarah added. Absolutely not, Admiral Peterson said firmly. Sarah, you're too valuable to risk on a mission like this. And, Marcus, you needed to coordinate the overall strategy. Admiral, Marcus said quietly, with respect, this isn't a mission you can order someone to take. This is a suicide run with a small chance of success. The only people who should go are volunteers who know exactly what they're signing up for. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the plan took shape. A single modified ship would attempt the impossible jump into the Omnicus system. Their mission, infiltrate the Eternal Council's fortress and either capture or eliminate the Zephyrian leadership. If they succeeded, the Empire would fall into chaos as local commanders fought for control. If they failed, they would die, and the Coalition would have to find another way to prevent the sterilization of hundreds of worlds. Sarah insisted on being part of the mission. As the creator of the original virus that had started the war, she was the only one who understood Zephyrian computer systems well enough to penetrate the Eternal Council's defenses. Marcus would lead the military component of the mission. His experience in impossible operations made him the logical choice to command what everyone privately acknowledged was a desperate gamble. The ship they used was the Impossible Dream, a vessel that had been rebuilt so many times with technology from different species that it barely resembled its original Zephyrian design. Emma insisted on painting a message on the hull in the languages of all the Coalition species, for every stolen child. The night before departure, Sarah sat in her quarters with Emma, reading one of the storybooks they had brought from Earth. It was about a small group of heroes who set out to defeat an evil empire against impossible odds. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "are you scared?" Sarah considered lying, but Emma deserved the truth. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm very scared. But you going anyway?" "Yes." Emma was quiet for a moment. "When the bad aliens took me, I was scared too. But I knew you would come for me." Sarah hugged her daughter tightly. "I will always come for you." "I know," Emma said. "And now you're going to make sure they can't take anyone else's children." The next morning, the Impossible Dream departed from New Geneva Station with a crew of 60 volunteers from 12 different species. Sarah watched through the viewports as the station grew smaller behind them, wondering if she would ever see Emma again. The journey to the edge of Zephyrian space took 3 weeks. During that time, the crew practiced their roles and prepared for what they knew would be their final mission. The mood was somber but determined. Everyone understood what was at stake. Marcus gathered the crew in the main bay before they attempted the jump to Omnicus Prime. Looking at the faces around him, he saw beings from across the galaxy who had come together for one purpose: to end the tyranny of the Zephyrian Empire. "In a few minutes, we're going to do something that every expert in galactic navigation says is impossible," Marcus said. "We're going to trust our lives to instinct, intuition, and the hope that the universe has a sense of justice." He paused, looking at each crew member in turn. "Some of you are here because the Zephyrians destroyed your worlds. Some because they enslaved your people. Some because they stole your children. All of you are here because you believe that freedom is worth fighting for." Zixtal rippled with colors of agreement, while Vexhai coiled its serpentine form in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of respect among its species. "Whatever happens in the next few hours," Marcus continued, "remember that we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every parent who has ever lost a child to the Empire. We're fighting for every species that has been conquered and enslaved. We're fighting for the idea that nobody has the right to rule over others through fear and violence." Sarah took her position at the navigation station, her hands moving over controls that combined technology from half a dozen different species. The Silithai energy sensors showed the chaotic gravitational currents around Omnicus Prime as patterns of light and color. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Beginning approach to jump point," Sarah announced. "All hands, prepare for impossible navigation." The ship shuddered as it entered the edge of the gravitational anomaly. Outside the viewports, space itself seemed to twist and bend as the laws of physics were stretched to their breaking point. The navigation computers showed error messages in 7 different languages. "Sarah," Marcus called from the command chair. "How are we doing?" "I have no idea," Sarah replied honestly. "But Emma was right. I can feel something. The currents have a pattern, like a river with rocks in it. I think I can find a path through." For the next 6 hours, Sarah navigated by instinct through gravitational forces that should have crushed their ship. The crew worked in tense silence, making constant adjustments to keep them on course toward a destination they couldn't see. When they finally emerged into normal space within the Omnicus system, everyone stared in awe at what they saw. The fortress world of Omnicus Prime was a sphere of metal and crystal the size of a small moon, orbiting a dying star. Massive energy shields surrounded it, and the space around it was filled with defensive platforms and patrol ships. But Sarah's virus had been updated during their journey. As soon as they entered the system, it began propagating through every networked system it could find. Within minutes, the outer defenses began failing. "All teams, prepare for insertion," Marcus announced. "We've got maybe 30 minutes before they figure out what's happening and respond with everything they have." The assault on Omnicus Prime was unlike anything in the history of galactic warfare. Instead of trying to fight through the defenses, the human teams used techniques borrowed from urban warfare and counterterrorism. They infiltrated the fortress through maintenance shafts, disguised themselves as maintenance drones, and moved through the structure like a virus spreading through a computer network. Sarah led a team toward the central computer core, while Marcus took another group toward the council chambers where the Eternal Council was meeting in emergency session. Around them, The fortress shook as automated defenses turned on each other, confused by the virus that had infected their targeting systems. The central computer core was a vast chamber filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with energy. It was beautiful and alien, representing thousands of years of technological development. Sarah felt almost guilty as she began the process of uploading the final version of her virus, the one that would shut down not just this fortress, but the entire Zephyrian command and control network. "Marcus," she called over the comms system, "I'm in position. How are you doing?" "We've reached the council chambers," Marcus replied. "The Eternal Council is here, all 12 of them. They're demanding to know what we want." Sarah smiled grimly as she initiated the final upload. "Tell them we want them to understand what it feels like to have someone more powerful decide that your children don't belong to you." The virus spread through the fortress systems like wildfire, shutting down life support, transportation, and communication systems. In the council chambers, Marcus faced beings who had ruled an empire for millennia and were now experiencing helplessness for the first time in their lives. "You cannot destroy us," the lead council member declared, a being that looked like a cross between a spider and a jellyfish. "The Empire will survive. Others will take our place." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, "but they'll know that we're watching. They'll know that if they take our children, we'll come for them. And next time we won't be alone." As if to prove his point, reports came in from across the galaxy. The virus had reached every major Zephyrian installation simultaneously. Command and control networks were failing, allowing local resistance movements to strike at their oppressors. The Empire wasn't just losing a battle, it was collapsing from within. The Eternal Council members looked at each other with what Sarah recognized as fear. For the first time in their long lives, they were facing extinction, and they didn't like the feeling. "What do you want from us?" the council leader asked. Marcus activated his communication system, broadcasting his words to the entire coalition fleet and beyond. "I want you to send a message to every species in the galaxy. Tell them that the Age of Empires is ending. Tell them that no one has the right to rule over others without consent. Tell them that if they take our children, we will come for them, and we will not stop until every stolen child is free." The fortress shuddered around them as Sarah's virus completed its work. The mighty stronghold of the Eternal Council was now a dead hulk drifting in space, its weapons silent, and its defenses powerless. "This is Admiral Peterson," came a voice over the comm system. "Coalition fleet has arrived in system. All teams prepare for extraction." As they evacuated the dying fortress, Sarah looked back at the structure that had controlled an empire for thousands of years. In a few hours, it would be nothing but space debris. The Eternal Council would be prisoners of the species they had once ruled. The Zephyrian Empire was finished. But, more importantly, the message had been sent to every potential empire in the galaxy. Humans protected their children, and they would make anyone who threatened them pay a price beyond imagination. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Hundreds of worlds would need to be rebuilt. Thousands of species would need to learn how to live as equals instead of rulers and subjects. And somewhere in the galaxy, Sarah's daughter Emma was growing up in a universe where freedom was possible because a group of desperate parents had refused to accept that anything was impossible. The Zephyrian Empire had lasted for thousands of years, but it had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated what humans would do to protect their children. Now the galaxy would never make that mistake again. 5 years after the fall of the Eternal Council, the galaxy was learning what peace looked like. Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station orbiting Earth, watching as ships from across the galaxy arrived for the founding assembly of the Galactic Cooperation Council. It was humanity's first attempt at organizing the liberated worlds into something that resembled a government rather than a military alliance. Through the massive viewport, she could see vessels that represented over 300 different species. Some were as small as shuttlecraft, carrying single ambassadors from remote worlds. Others were massive city ships that housed entire diplomatic delegations. All of them were here because humanity had kept a promise. No one would rule over others without consent. Emma, now 15 years old and serving as a junior translator for the assembly, approached her mother with a data tablet displaying the morning's agenda. She had grown tall and confident, speaking 19 languages fluently and moving between different cultural groups with the ease of someone who had never known a universe where diversity was feared rather than celebrated. Mom, Ambassador Vexhai wants to discuss the enforcement protocols for the new charter, Emma said, switching effortlessly between English and the complex harmonic language of the resonant collective. There's some concern about how to handle species that might try to rebuild Empire-style governments. Sarah nodded, but her attention was focused on a particular ship approaching the station. It was sleek and black, with design elements that she recognized as Zephyrian. After 5 years, seeing their technology still made her heart race, even though she knew this ship belonged to the reformed Zephyrian Republic. Marcus appeared at her side, wearing the dress uniform of the Galactic Defense Force. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and he moved with the careful dignity of someone who had become a symbol of resistance to oppression. But Sarah could still see the Navy SEAL in his posture, always ready for the next impossible mission. The former Empire representatives are here, Marcus observed, following her gaze to the approaching ship. Think they're ready to be just another member of the galactic community? We'll find out, Sarah replied. Vexhai seems to think most of them are genuinely committed to change. The younger generation especially. And the older generation? Still angry about losing their empire, but smart enough to know they can't get it back. The reformed Zephyrian Republic had been one of the most difficult transitions after the war. When the Eternal Council fell, the Empire had collapsed into dozens of competing factions. Some had tried to maintain the old ways of conquest and domination. Those factions have been systematically dismantled by coalition forces and their own oppressed populations. But others, led primarily by younger Zephyrians who had grown up hearing stories of the human resistance, had chosen a different path. They had voluntarily dismantled their military forces, freed all enslaved populations, and requested admission to the growing coalition of free worlds. It was an unprecedented transformation in galactic history, and many species remained skeptical about whether it would last. Emma's communication device chimed with an urgent message. Mom, there's a problem in Assembly Hall 7. The Hraktar delegation is refusing to sit in the same room as the Vorthak representatives. Sarah sighed. The Hraktar and the Vorthak had been at war for over 200 years before the Zephyrians conquered both their worlds. Now that they were free, old conflicts were resurfacing. It was one of the many challenges facing the new galactic government. Tell them that if they can't work out their differences peacefully, they can explain to the rest of the galaxy why their ancient grudges are more important than building a better future, Sarah said. And remind them that humans managed to work with the species that stole our children. Emma grinned and headed off to deliver the message. Sarah marveled at how easily her daughter navigated complex diplomatic situations that would have challenged experienced ambassadors. The children who had grown up during and after the war seemed to have a natural understanding of how to work with beings who were completely different from themselves. Marcus's communication device buzzed with an incoming priority message. He frowned as he read it, then looked at Sarah with an expression she recognized from their war days. What is it? Sarah asked. Long-range sensors have detected ships approaching from the galactic rim, Marcus said quietly. Unknown configuration, but they're heading directly toward inhabited systems. Sarah felt her stomach drop. How many ships? 12 confirmed, possibly more. They're not responding to communication attempts. Another empire? That's what we need to find out. Admiral Peterson's voice came over the station's communication system. All senior military personnel report to the command center immediately. We have a situation. The command center was a hub of activity as beings from across the galaxy worked to analyze the incoming threat. Holographic displays showed the approaching ships, their sleek forms unlike anything in the galactic databases. Admiral Peterson stood at the center of the room, now in his 70s, but still sharp and commanding. Around him, the senior staff of the Galactic Defense Force represented dozens of different species, all of them veterans of the war against the Zephyrian Empire. Status report. Peterson ordered as Sarah and Marcus entered the room. Commander Williams, now the head of Galactic Intelligence, activated a display showing the unknown vessels. 12 ships, approximately 2 kilometers in length each. They emerged from hyperspace at the galactic rim 6 hours ago and have been accelerating toward the core systems. Their technology is completely unknown, but preliminary scans suggest it's more advanced than anything we've encountered. Dr. Harper, who had become the coalition's chief scientist, added her analysis. Energy signatures suggest they're powered by something beyond conventional antimatter systems. Their whole composition includes materials we can identify. Most concerning, they seem to be generating some kind of field that interferes with our long-range sensors. Sarah studied the images of the ships. They were beautiful in an alien way, with flowing lines that suggested they had been grown rather than built. But there was something ominous about their approach, a purposefulness that reminded her uncomfortably of the Zephyrian fleet that had first arrived at Earth. Any attempt at communication? Marcus asked. We've tried every known frequency and protocol, Williams replied. No response. They're either ignoring us or incapable of communication in any way we understand. Vex High, who served as the Coalition's advisor on alien psychology, coiled its serpentine form in a gesture that indicated deep thought. The pattern of their approach suggests reconnaissance rather than immediate attack. They appear to be gathering information about our defensive capabilities. We're choosing targets, Marcus said grimly. Emma entered the command center carrying a data tablet, her expression serious beyond her years. Mom, I've been analyzing the linguistic patterns in our communication attempts. There's something strange. What do you mean, sweetheart? The ships aren't ignoring our messages, Emma explained. They're analyzing them. Each time we send a communication, their response time decreases slightly, as if they're learning our languages in real time. Dr. Harper looked at Emma with surprise. That's incredibly sophisticated. To learn an entirely alien language from passive observation would require computational power beyond anything we've achieved. Or maybe they've done this before, Sarah said quietly. Maybe they've encountered and learned from other species. The implications hung in the air like a dark cloud. If these beings were as advanced as they appeared, and if they had a history of contact with other species, where were those other species now? Admiral, Marcus said, I recommend we mobilize the defense fleet and prepare for possible hostile action. At minimum, we need to be ready to protect the civilian populations. Peterson nodded. Agreed. But we also need to keep trying to establish communication. The last thing we want is to start a war because of a misunderstanding. Over the next several hours, the command center became a hive of activity. Ships from across the galaxy began moving into defensive positions around key systems. The reformed Zephyrian Republic offered their most advanced vessels to assist in the defense, a gesture that surprised many observers. Sarah worked with teams of linguists and computer specialists to analyze every scrap of data they could gather about the approaching ships. Meanwhile, Emma coordinated with young translators from dozens of different species, bringing a fresh perspective to the communication attempts. I have an idea, Emma said during one of the strategy sessions. What if we're approaching this wrong? We're trying to talk to them like they're another species like us. But what if there's something completely different? Different how? Dr. Harper asked. Emma activated a holographic display showing the mathematical patterns in the aliens' flight formations. Look at how they move. Perfect geometric precision, synchronized across vast distances, no apparent individual variation. What if they're not individual beings at all? What if they're more like a single consciousness distributed across multiple bodies? Sarah stared at her daughter, amazed once again by her insight. A hive mind? Maybe. Or something even more alien. The point is, if they think collectively rather than individually, our communication attempts might seem as meaningless to them as ant pheromones seem to us. Dr. Harper began working furiously on her calculations. If Emma's right, we need to change our entire approach. Instead of trying to establish dialogue, we need to demonstrate our collective consciousness as a galactic community. How do we do that? Marcus asked. Sarah had an idea that was either brilliant or insane. We show them the assembly. All 300 species working together, making decisions collectively. We demonstrate that we're not just individual worlds, but a unified galactic consciousness. The plan that emerged was unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of hiding the founding assembly from the approaching threat, they would broadcast it directly to the unknown ships. Every species would participate in a coordinated demonstration of galactic cooperation, showing the aliens that this region of space was inhabited by a unified collective intelligence. Emma worked with the assembly's technical teams to coordinate the broadcast. Every ship, every station, every inhabited world would participate simultaneously. The message wouldn't be words or images, but a demonstration of coordinated action across thousands of light years. Think of it as a galactic symphony, Emma explained to the assembled ambassadors. Each species plays their part, but together we create something beautiful that none of US could achieve alone. The Hraktar and Vorthak delegations, who have been arguing for days, were the first to volunteer to work together on the demonstration. Former Zephyrian representatives offered their expertise in large-scale coordination. Species that had never spoken to each other began collaborating on complex sequences of actions that would span the galaxy. As the unknown ships approached the outer edge of inhabited space, the galactic demonstration began. On thousands of worlds, beings of every description participated in coordinated activities. Ships moved in precise formations, space stations synchronized their lighting patterns, and even planetary governments timed their communications to create a vast, galaxy-spanning pattern of activity. The effect was breathtaking. From space, it would be clear that this region of the galaxy was inhabited not by random, chaotic life, but by a coordinated intelligence capable of actions on an unprecedented scale. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station, watching as ships around Earth moved in perfect harmony with vessels thousands of light years away. Emma stood beside her, monitoring the communication channels to coordinate timing across the vast distances involved. "It's working," Emma said excitedly. "The unknown ships have stopped accelerating. They're responding." On the holographic displays, the 12 alien vessels began moving in formations that mirrored the patterns being displayed by the Galactic Coalition. It wasn't communication in any traditional sense, but it was acknowledgement. The aliens were demonstrating that they understood what they were seeing. Then, something unprecedented happened. One of the alien ships broke formation and approached the diplomatic station. As it drew closer, Sarah could see that its surface was covered in patterns of light that pulsed in rhythm with the galactic demonstration. A new voice came over the communication system, but it wasn't speaking any known language. Instead, it was a complex harmony of sounds that seemed to convey meaning directly to the mind rather than through words. Emma grabbed her mother's arm. "Mom, I can understand them. Not the words, but the meaning. They're saying greetings, fellow gardeners." "Gardeners?" Sarah asked. The meaning became clearer as the alien communication continued. These beings, who called themselves the architects, traveled through the galaxy looking for evidence of what they termed cultivated consciousness, intelligent life that had learned to work together rather than destroy itself. Most species they encountered were either primitive or had destroyed themselves through warfare. But occasionally, very rarely, they found civilizations that had learned to grow beyond their individual limitations and work together for the benefit of all life in their region of space. The Galactic Coalition, with its hundreds of cooperating species, was exactly what the architects had been hoping to find. Over the following days, formal contact was established between the architects and the Galactic Cooperation Council. The aliens were ancient beyond human comprehension, having traveled the galaxy for millions of years. They served as gardeners of consciousness, helping young civilizations avoid the mistakes that led to self-destruction. They had been watching the Coalition's development since the fall of the Zephyrian Empire, impressed by humanity's ability to unite former enemies in a common cause. The formal demonstration of galactic cooperation had convinced them that this region of space was ready for the next stage of development. "What is the next stage?" Sarah asked during one of the formal meetings with the architect representatives. The answer came not in words, but in images that appeared directly in their minds. They saw vast networks of civilizations spanning multiple galaxies, all working together to nurture life and consciousness wherever it appeared. They saw technologies that could heal dying worlds, energies that could power entire star systems, and knowledge that could solve problems the Coalition hadn't even known existed. But, most importantly, they saw a future where no child would ever again be stolen from their parents, where no species would be enslaved or conquered, and where the galaxy itself would become a garden where all forms of life could flourish. Marcus looked at Sarah as the architect's presentation concluded. "Think we're ready for this?" Sarah looked around the room at the representatives of hundreds of different species, all of them working together despite their differences. She thought about Emma and the other children who had grown up knowing that diversity was strength rather than weakness. "A few years ago, we were just one planet fighting for our children," Sarah said. "Now we're a galactic civilization that protects everyone's children." I think we're ready for whatever comes next. The architect's arrival marked the beginning of a new era in galactic history. The coalition that had formed to fight the Zephyrian Empire had evolved into something unprecedented, a truly cooperative galactic civilization that proved intelligent life could grow beyond the need for domination and conquest. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that had started on a small blue planet when parents refused to accept that their children were gone forever. When you threaten what humans love, they don't just fight back. They reshape the entire universe to make sure it never happens again. 20 years had passed since the children came home. Emma and Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the starship New Horizon, watching the birth of a new star through the ship's viewports. The stellar nursery around them glowed with the light of creation itself, where the architect technology was helping to guide the formation of solar systems that would one day host countless forms of life. At 35, Emma commanded a ship crewed by beings from over 50 different species, all of them working together to tend the garden of consciousness that the galaxy had become. She wore the uniform of the Galactic Gardeners Corps, the organization that had evolved from the old defense force as humanity and its allies moved beyond the need for military conflict. Captain, called Lieutenant Zoexida, a young Kathrani who served as the ship's communications officer. We're receiving a priority transmission from Galactic Central. There's been a discovery in the Andromeda Spiral. Emma nodded, her attention shifting from the beautiful cosmic vista to the more immediate concerns of her mission. Put it through to the main screen. The holographic display activated, showing the familiar face of Admiral Sarah Chun, Emma's mother, and the current head of the Galactic Coordination Council. At 55, Sarah had become one of the most respected figures in galactic politics, known for her ability to find peaceful solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Emma, Sarah said, her expression serious but not alarmed, we need you to divert to the coordinates I'm transmitting. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected something unprecedented. What kind of something? Emma asked, settling into her command chair. A distress signal. From outside our galaxy. The bridge fell silent. In the 20 years since contact with the architects, the galactic civilization had grown and prospered beyond all expectations. Hundreds of species had joined the cooperative, and the technology shared by the architects had allowed them to begin exploring other galaxies. But they had never encountered another civilization at their level of development. Is it the architects? Asked Commander Nexval, Emma's second-in-command, and a former Zephyrian who had become one of her closest friends. No, Sarah replied. The signal is definitely artificial, but it's using technology we don't recognize. More importantly, the mathematical structure of the message suggests it's from a multi-species civilization like ours. Emma felt a familiar excitement, the same feeling she remembered from childhood when her parents would tell her stories about the early days of galactic exploration. How far away is the source? Approximately 2 million light-years. In the direction of the Andromeda Galaxy. Emma's navigator, a Valdris named Floater whose species excelled at long-distance travel calculations, rippled with patterns of concern. Captain, even with our most advanced architect-enhanced drives, a journey of that distance would take several months. Then, we better get started, Emma said. Sarah, what's our mission profile? First contact and possible rescue operation, Sarah replied. If there's another cooperative civilization out there in trouble, we need to help them. It's what gardeners do. The journey to the edge of the galaxy took 6 weeks, even with the advanced propulsion systems that combined human engineering with architect technology and innovations from dozens of different species. During the trip, Emma's crew worked tirelessly to analyze the mysterious distress signal. Dr. Yextar, the ship's xenobiologist and a descendant of the original Vexhi who had helped humanity understand the Zephyrians, made the first breakthrough. The signal contains linguistic markers from at least 12 different communication systems, she reported during a senior staff meeting. This is definitely from a multi-species alliance. What are they saying? Emma asked. The translation is still incomplete, but the core message appears to be a warning. Something about the Devourers and worlds going silent. Emma felt a chill that reminded her of old stories about the Zephyrian Empire. Any indication of what these Devourers might be? Unknown. But the mathematical structure of their signal suggests they're dealing with a threat that targets civilizations specifically, not just individual worlds. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez Singh, Emma's tactical officer and the son of the legendary Admiral Marcus Rodriguez, looked up from his analysis station. His father had died 5 years earlier in a peaceful accident during a terraforming operation, but his son had inherited both his tactical brilliance and his protective instincts. Captain Marcus said, "I've been analyzing the signal decay patterns. If I'm reading this correctly, the civilization that sent this message is under active attack right now." Emma stood up, her decision made. How much time do we save by cutting across the galactic void instead of following the spiral arms? Floater's patterns shifted to indicate rapid calculation. 3 weeks, but the navigation risks are considerable. We would be traveling through regions with no reference points and minimal gravitational anchors. The same kind of impossible navigation my parents used to reach Zenthari Prime, Emma said with a slight smile. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, prepare the ship for void transit. Dr. Yextar, continue working on the translation. Everyone else, prepare for the possibility that we're heading into a war zone. The journey across the galactic void was unlike anything the crew had experienced. 4 days at a time, they traveled through empty space with no stars visible in any direction. Only the ship's advanced sensors could detect the distant galaxies that served as navigation markers. During the crossing, more signals arrived from their destination. Each one was weaker than the last, suggesting that whatever was happening in Andromeda was getting worse. Emma found herself thinking about the stories her parents had told her about the early days of the resistance against the Zephyrian Empire. How a small group of desperate people had somehow found the strength to challenge an enemy that seemed invincible. Now, perhaps, it was her generation's turn to carry on that tradition. The ship's senior staff had become like family during their years of service together. Commander Nexval had grown up on one of the worlds liberated by Emma's parents and had dedicated their life to preventing other species from suffering under tyranny. Dr. Yextar represented the new generation of former